Welcome to this week of the X Podcast. So good to be with my boys. I got Russ and Tim over here. My name's Kevin. We're so glad to have you with us wherever you are tuning in, listening, watching this from. Today's a crazy day. If you're an American, if you live in the United States, this is a wild, unprecedented day. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, is getting impeached for the second time. It's never happened in the history of our republic.
Impeached by the House.
Unless you've lived under a rock, then you know that there has been some...
Well, what's crazy, hold on, last week, while we were recording this,
it was last
it
week.
was taking off, like the stuff in Washington, the
It
Capitol
feels like
building.
a month ago.
Yeah.
It does, was last week, because I remember we finished recording last week's podcast, and I went back into my office, and went back to work, and one of the other pastors texted me, or someone, I saw a news feed pop up on my thing about something going on at Capitol, but I'm like, what's going on? I didn't even realize. That would have been about 1 something.
Yeah.
Boom, I pull up, I start reading, I turn on the news, and we're just dumbfounded. You guys all came over to my office, and we're just sitting here watching the events that happened a week ago.
Definitely a where were you when type of situation.
Historical day, unfortunately.
So historical day, we're just a group of people. Some people called them mobs or rioters, and I think that's probably right and just, that stormed into the Capitol building and laid siege to it. There's a whole bunch of words being thrown around right now: insurrection, sedition,
Coup.
coup.
That was what I heard on the
all sorts of things,
broadcast.
and conspiracy. FBI is involved. Everybody's involved, and it really, you're kind of left as an American with the inauguration happening in, I think, 7 days.
What is today?
It is 7 days.
Today's 13th?
Today's 13th.
Oh, wow.
So in 7
So
days.
1 week from today.
1 week from today.
Inaugurating a new president.
Yeah.
And just the tension that's in the air is really unbelievable. If you heard our podcast last week, we are in the middle. This is our second week. We're in the middle of our second week of our 21-day prayer and fast as a church.
Yeah.
And so us three and many others here are fasting social media.
I have never been
so
so
glad.
happy.
I'm so glad.
I don't know that I'm going back.
Can you imagine?
I'm not even lying.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm going back. It was such a
Let's
relief.
extend the fast.
Yeah.
I feel so much better.
Why? Why do you feel so much better?
Because I just know that if I were on social media, I would be inundated with this. It would it would consume my mind. And I have thought about it a lot. We've had a lot of conversations because it is such a significant moment in our history. But I know the cesspool of social media. And I can't even imagine what it's like right now. I can't imagine the fighting. I can't imagine the videos being sent from this person. You know what I mean? Like, I have never been so happy to be off social media, and I don't know if I'm going back.
For two reasons. I think number one for me, if I'm just being honest, part of me does not want to know what some people are saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just don't.
I don't.
Me neither.
And I think the second part is being off social media. I think the three of us would probably consider ourselves pretty self-controlled, and because of our roles, we try to be slow to speak. But I think being off social media forces you to respond instead of react.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's one of the hopes of these conversations is that we actually take time not to knee-jerk reaction, but to process and think more than we stew and react.
Yeah.
I actually like the fact that here we are having a conversation about a week later because, you had feelings in that moment, but you didn't know what to make of it. And then we've had a week of just things come out and other things, and I'm sure there's more still to come out. So,
Yeah, it's been refreshing to me to think of a situation or a tragedy or an event like this without thinking about the arguments of individuals.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what anybody thinks about this other than the people who live in my house and people I work with, and I'm glad. I'm so glad that that's the case because I think that if you're listening, consider how can you come up to your own consensus and your own opinion? How can you process this event by yourself on your own? without the threat of somebody unbecoming your friend, without the threat of somebody trashing your name, or without the threat of somebody making some sort of post about you or offending somebody, processing a situation in its entirety to see how it potentially would transform the way you look at the world. Does that make sense?
That does.
Yeah.
You know what stinks? I've actually had people. There's certain of a wide variety of friends, and like I said, I've been very grateful to not be on social media. But I've actually had several people, for whatever reason, take a screenshot of some people's posts and be like, "Can you believe this?" I'm like, I am not on social media for that reason.
You know, can I just?
Oh, you're not? I'll show you.
Can I pause this for just a second? I have got your hat.
Yeah.
Why? What does it mean? Like,
I'm a
I know
motorcycle
you're
guy. Yeah.
We gotta.
no, like
I have to
for
narrate
real.
this for people listening. So
Wait.
So
I just
Pastor Russ,
dawned
he
on
has
me.
a hat that says coffee and motorcycles. And the coffee part, he does like
You
coffee.
are.
I've
Coffee
never seen you
connoisseur.
on a motorcycle.
I'm
I've
ne-
never seen you driving a motorcycle.
I'm more known for motorcycles than I am for coffee.
Yeah.
And no.
Stop. That's not true. Why do you got this
Bromoto,
out?
which
Yeah.
PK knows about.
Yeah.
So in case you don't know, Bromoto, it's for whatever reason, it's this coffee shop in Atlanta. It's my
Yeah.
favorite spot to go to. And it's exploded for whatever reason. I don't know if it's their
Mm-hmm.
branding, their coffee's awesome. But if you ever go, it's actually, this is a weird combination. It's a hipster coffee / motorcycle DIY shop.
Okay.
And
that
so-
explains it.
Speaking of
I
motorcycles,
had no idea.
Did you know he's a motorcycle
Yes,
guy?
I
No.
heard
Yeah,
this
let's
is the
talk
plan
about
for this
this.
next
No.
season of
Yeah,
life.
I might
So
show it on
get-
YouTube, maybe a picture of you on your Harley.
Okay.
I love to
Let's
see
do
I
it.
it.
had a Harley.
Yeah.
I
And it was pretty
currently
sweet.
have a
Bright
Harley,
orange.
but he's a dog. I had a Harley motorcycle and sold it years ago. But anyways,
Years ago.
Years ago.
It was fun. But
was.
This is my newest.
okay. I didn't know
Souvenir
that-
when I went to
just-
Atlanta a
I'm
couple
sorry.
weeks
I
ago.
just did not picture you as a motorcycle guy.
you
and so-
kidding me?
No, yeah, I am. But so anyways, I did not mean to digress. It's just when you were talking,
You
it just
noticed
caught
it.
my attention. So I was like, oh my gosh, motorcycles. I had no idea. So anyways, I just to the point. I think it's valid and it's important for us to have a conversation about it. That's one of the things that we always set out to do on this. This is not our ministry. This is a podcast. This is kind of something fun for us who we started long before the podcast of us just getting together in conversations and just critically thinking about current cultural situations, things that are happening, and wanting to really encourage people to think critically, to kind of think with a healthy view, and lead to, or what leads to, I think, healthy outcomes in our thought process and what we believe. And so, we just felt like it was important to have a conversation just about what happened, how we're processing it, how we're feeling about it, what do we think is going to happen, and what's being said about all of this and its implications even into our own lives. That's kind of what we're doing. So we're not pastors sitting at a table. We're Christ followers who are Americans. This all affects all of us.
Yep.
If you live in this country, what happened on January 6th affects all of us. And we just thought, it's important for us to talk about it.
And who acknowledge, I think, the difficult nature of
Oh.
politics right now in this country.
Yeah.
And how you have a lot of everyday people and people who would say that I'm a Christ follower who don't know where to stand, don't know where to, what party to be a part of, what group to associate with, what not to say, and how to process it. And that's a real struggle, I think, in this country. And honestly, we disagree about a lot of things, and I think that whole concept of iron sharpens iron, you know, and that's our goal with each other is to challenge each other's mindsets, to say, hey, I see a little bit of a hypocritical thinking, and when you said this, but then you meant that, or I remember when you said this, when that, so that's how we talk with each other. And so we might get a little, we might say some things today that might step on your personal toes a little bit, and we're not doing it to hurt you, we're doing it to challenge you, and to potentially open your eyes to another way of thinking that we're not saying is right 100%, but we're just opening the doors to how we process. Does that make sense?
And hopefully, I don't know, to me the goal of any human that wants to grow is they would want that.
Right.
I heard somebody say one time, I know it's a pretty famous quote, that those that get offended the most easily need to get offended more often. And if you really want to become a sharper thinker, then hopefully you listen to something, and if you disagree with it, instead of being offended, you think, man, that was an opportunity for me to learn or to expand my mindset, or even, if nothing else, my empathy of, oh, they think that way, and that's why.
Yeah. I want to start off just by getting you guys' raw reaction off of when the protests that happened last week escalated into a riot, escalated into breaking into the Capitol building, and we saw all sorts of things happen. We saw President-elect Joe Biden come out and call out the President of the United States to respond, and there's so many unprecedented things that were happening that day. What was your tell me, share your heart with me, share your reactions with me, and what was going through your mind?
My first knee-jerk reaction was actually, man, what is this year? Oh, wait, it's 2021.
Right.
Honestly. And then from there, is so many different emotions. There's shocked but not shocked, which made me angry. Anger, sadness, the awe that this is a historic moment. It's been, since 1814? 1812. That the Capitol has been breached. And so then you're watching, and then as we started watching, we didn't realize whether this was live. They started showing shots that have been shown before.
Yeah.
So then the reports are starting to come in. Wow, this is a really, really big historic deal. This is ominous. This is heartbreaking. But then one by one is that you see the lives become lost. I think it's in that moment that just Pandora's box opens in your mind of all the scenarios that could play out in the next, not just few hours, but few days and few weeks. What is this going to mean politically? What is this going to mean just even in the heightened polarization of where everybody stands on everything?
Yeah.
What are people's reactions going to be like this? Is this going to be the tipping point for the Republican Party? Is this going to be a tipping point? How's President Trump processing this? What's going to happen? Is the National Guard about to show up and shut the whole thing down? I think for me, it was just this wide range of emotions of sadness, anger, heartbreak, shock, but not shock. And then for this to be the last 2 weeks of this particular presidency, it's an exclamation point on the surrealness of the last year. And wherever side you fall on of just everything that's been happening. And just this was the tipping point of polarization, political tension, rhetoric on both sides, and just a really ominous day.
Yeah, I remember sitting in my office, and I actually pulled it up on a TV, and then you guys came, and some other ones came, and were watching it. It was weird. It kind of almost reminded me of 9/11, where watching on the news something unfold, even though by the time I'd seen on the news, the planes had hit the towers, but it just, you're like glued to it, like what's coming out next. And I don't know if I'll ever get the scene out of my mind when they showed the one wide pan shot of the Capitol, and I don't know which side it was, where it's just covered with people all the way up and around. And I remember the picture of the people on the window washing things, and they're climbing over stuff, and I'm like, what is happening? Like, it's just mayhem. And I felt a lot of similar. I think it was I was just more numb, like shocked. Like, I don't think I'd processed kind of like how it makes me feel. I felt like it was like, this is not the way we handle things in a democratic environment. Like that, it was like,
I also felt embarrassed.
Oh yeah, well, I'll get there. I felt unbelievable that we're watching this. I remember having Zach, one of our pastors on staff, in there who's a bit younger, and just him kind of like, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this in my life, And I haven't either, but from being a little bit older than him, and kind of just, I remember what it was like living in the 80s during the Cold War stuff with the Soviet Union. There was always a tension, even though we never had something like that you always just felt like something was about to happen. And it's just weird when it's on your own soil and it's your own people, and your own Americans doing this. And I think the biggest thing that I will remember that was seared into my mind that was what you said, embarrassment, was seeing, and my guess is it's more of a rally / protest, which we have the freedom to do that under the First Amendment. And yet when that turns into mob scene and people breaking in, people hiding, and all of those, the imagery, And what I can see in this, not amongst all these Trump banners and Confederate flags and American flags, are seeing this big, massive banner that said Jesus 2020. And in that moment, I felt embarrassment as someone who is a Jesus follower that someone would attach his name to what was happening right there. And even if they weren't there, maybe, because I personally feel that probably a lot of the people that were originally there are there for a protest, and then it turns into a mob scene, and there's people that kind of incite it, and then it goes crazy. And so even if people were showing up there because they think, they're representing what they believe are some moral values or other things, but there was one of them is like one of the largest banners that was there. I'm not even sure what that means, Jesus 2020. Like he was running for office. I'm not going to get into that politically. But just that image of his name attached to something that was violent, that was an insurrection, that was an embarrassment to our country, that was against the law, breaking in on that caused that. I felt ashamed. And again, I know it doesn't speak for everybody, but as someone who follows Jesus, that is not something that I want to mark my faith and my that. So those were just kind of some of the emotions I felt originally.
How would someone who voted for Trump as a Christian feel about all this? Because you've heard the narrative of, there's a huge evangelical base that says that there's no other way to vote other than for President Trump. So how do you, where are you at right now if you're that person?
I don't know because I haven't been on social media. So good news is I haven't had to see all of those people that have been pushing that.
I'm going to ask hard questions today, boys. We're going to get into it.
Okay, but you can answer that. I just want to say and push back and say, I don't know that it's fair to just, I understand what you're saying, but that's where we dump everybody in one category. And say, you know what I mean?
No,
and say, you vote for that.
Specifically about the Christian who voted for Trump. Well, how are you processing these days? I'm not really talking about right or wrong. I'm just talking about.
Not how should they be processing, but how are they processing?
Sure. How are you processing? Russ, as a Christian who voted for Trump, how are you processing? No, I'm just kidding. We don't know who any of us voted for, but how do you process these times? What's going through your mind if that's you? Because
why are you? What? I don't know how we can answer for someone. I think the only way we can speak to that, if we're not going to speak for ourselves.
Can I?
Oh, he takes us to jail.
Yeah, I know.
He's getting hot real quick.
I have so many thoughts, but I'll remain so probably annoyingly filtered. But I think obviously there are many people you cannot categorize a group of people. People who voted for Biden or for President Trump do not fit into neat categories. Everybody has different reasons. So I'm going to take a few stabs. I think there might be people that voted for President Trump that have deep grievance with his rhetoric and his conduct, but voted for him out of policy, who might still say, hey, I actually vehemently condemn this insurrection that happened at the Capitol. But because of my core convictions, even though I'm grieved, I don't know that I would take my vote back because of policy and because I still stand firm. There might be some that would say, no, I did vote for him out of policy, but this was my breaking point, which we've seen. Yeah, this was finally actually the breaking point for a lot of people. I've not been on social media, so I don't know anecdotally what that looks like, but we can just look at the GOP. We can look at cabinet members of his own that are already resigning. We can look at governors and senators and the letters they've sent. We can look at President Bush's statement, House members. I think, so that's two categories. I think there's probably a third category of people who didn't just vote for him out of policy, but actually like who he is, but they really disagree with what happened and may have mixed views. And then I think there's a fourth camp that would say, some would categorize this as a far right camp that would say, no, I actually understand and empathize and sympathize and maybe even agree with this, / maybe even float around what most would consider debunked conspiracy theories of, well, this was Antifa anyways. So I think those are probably four camps.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think, and I do. That's why I was trying to say it's really hard to categorize and just put everybody in one of those, because I do think that it's across the board, and even some of the conversations I've had with just a few people, not many, on this, but have you can kind of hear it, and I agree with those. I feel like that's a good. There's 4 probably responses, and that maybe that's too simplistic, but there's 4 basic camps that you could fall into probably on this. I think that your question
as a Republican or
as a Christian who voted for Trump is what you asked. Someone who's a Christian who voted for Donald Trump, okay, in this past one. I think, just to add to that, I guess my thoughts on it, I think that you as a Christ follower, me as a Christ follower, looking into this situation, regardless of how I voted.
How did you vote, by the way?
Well, yeah. So
You said you were gonna.
Yeah.
well, did I say I was going to talk about in this one?
This
You
was
guys are fun. But I think that when you mentioned the sense of how people said it was their breaking point, I think that there's probably a lot of Christians that maybe said I've supported. I think there's a lot of people that supported Donald Trump from the evangelical camp, as you kind of indicated. And outside the evangelical camp as well, but on a Christian base, that would say I was supporting it because he and possibly his party represent moral values that I hold very dear. And so regardless of the person, I'm voting for the policy. And I understand that. And I don't know that we can fault that. I think there's different people in different places logically in how they're approaching how they vote. I think when you get to the place of just how someone feels about voting, because I think that was a question you asked, you voted for him, and then you see his potential inciting, among others, I don't know if you can say potential, but I'm just saying, okay, inciting of it, but we'll just say how liable are you for the things that you say? And that's a big question that's happening right now.
Well, and there's people, I think, that are out there saying if you ever voted for Donald Trump, then you are guilty of sedition, that you are guilty of inciting. You should be ashamed of yourself. I don't want you in my life. I mean, there's people like that.
There are, and but I feel like those people are the extremes, and I feel like the problem in our country are the extremes on the left, extremes on the right, and I feel like that's the problem. Is I think what happened on January 6th was what I hope and believe is a very, very small percentage of extremists that instigated something. That the question, and how does that reflect on someone who may have voted for him? And I think that's kind of the question that you're asking as a Christian.
But how would you put yourself in those shoes? Okay, put yourself, whether or not I don't really even know how either of you voted, to be honest. But how would you, if you were someone who says I want to be like Christ and I voted for Donald Trump, maybe once, maybe twice, how do I process these recent events in a way that would
so I think 2 things are really, really important to think about, and I don't even know if this is what you're getting at, but when you think about leadership, whether it's in another leader or your own life, I think 2 things that I would posit, and I want to be careful, and you can take with this whatever you want to do, apply it to however you want to apply it, party, leader, whatever, is that an interesting shift in I believe conservative politics is that in the past, one of the maybe weapons or arguments from the Republican Party would be the character of the leader matters most, and maybe policy second. There seems to be a shift in conservative politics, and right or wrong, that it's not that doesn't matter, but it's actually the argument's policy first, and character second. Look, they're not a pastor. They're a leader of a country. I think 2 things that are worth bringing to the forefront when it comes
I've also heard that to go with that, it's like, well, that's the one thing about Donald Trump is that he's not a politician. So he's going to go in as a business leader, and it's almost like carte blanche to be able to go, well, he can act however he wants to act because he's trying to drain the cesspool that
but
is
either
Washington, and you know what I mean?
Either way, when you're in a role,
Mm-hmm.
Your leadership is what dictates. The world that's in you is what creates the world around you, right? Your words, your conduct, your behavior. And so I think when it comes to look at this, look at the three biggest hot button topics of this year.
This year or last year?
Of this past year, of
Okay.
the last 12 months, would be you have the issue of racism, police brutality, social justice. You have this pandemic, the virus. And then you have the political polarization, rhetoric, everything of the insurrection that happened a week ago from today. Those three things that have formed and shaped our world more than anything else are not policy issues. Those are leadership issues. Now, whether you feel like President Trump or the left handled them well, good, bad, indifferent, that's up for debate, process, dialogue. But
There's probably been leaders on both sides of the aisle that have handled the situation in their context well and poorly.
right, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Each of those that you just outlined.
Yes, each of those. In each of those situations, leadership from the top and then leadership in both parties. And when I say leadership, I don't just mean when I think of you, this isn't brown nosing, but when we hit,
Oh gosh.
but you know that I
go ahead,
love to
go
kiss
ahead.
up.
So
You
quiet.
want to hear
Let 'em-
this?
let 'em talk. Yeah, I wanna
I
hear
just
it.
think you're so wonderful, and I think, but
Give 'em a
I mean,
raise.
when I think of when I think of when we as a staff hit uncertain times, didn't know when the heck we're going to meet again. I mean, are we all going to lose our jobs? Like whatever. And the leadership posture you took was one of, I'm going to be really, really honest about what we know and don't know. I'm going to be really, really clear, and I'm going to be really intentional about my tone. And I just think it's very important to think about in both sides, in both parties, and with every leader that we follow, with the leaders we choose to become, when we're thinking about, for me as a follower of Jesus, how do I lead like Jesus? I want to be thinking, how does my leadership and my tone and my conduct set the example? Because really, even in my role, the leader and the person that I am is more important than the policies or rules or programs that I create. So I would
People
say
over systems. That's what we say.
right, people over systems. So I would say in policies and leadership both matter. So that I think that's the first thing I would throw out there is that leadership, you don't lead primarily through policy, you lead primarily through who you are. And then the second thing, I think, no matter where you stand on this issue, no matter what you think is the cause and effect, because the truth is we could play the blame game all day long. There's not one singular person. There's things that directly incited and fomented violence against the Capitol and against our most sacred democratic institutions last Wednesday. However, there's not one person or one party that you can say they get all of the blame. And so the thing that we have to ask, even apart from leadership, but that's part of leadership, is the impact of my words. I don't think anyone can walk away from this event and can walk away from this past year and the last few years and still not be convinced that words don't matter. That what it says in Proverbs isn't an exaggeration. The power of life and death is in the tongue. When I was a student pastor, I used to preach most of my messages, if I had to pick a topic that most of them were about the tongue. And I would do this cheesy thing. I'd say, what do you think is the most powerful weapon in the world? And they'd throw out nuclear bombs and atomic bombs, hydrogen bombs, whatever. And then I'd have them hold their tongue. And I just tell them while they're making stupid noises, you are holding the most powerful and dangerous weapon in the universe. And I think for all of us, whether we're assessing, and hopefully, like we talk about the filters, one of the things about being off social media, hopefully, whatever you're doing right now, you're taking the time to maybe peel back some of your usual filters. The filter of whatever party you would attach yourself to, the filter of whatever bubble you would be in, the filter of whatever you would usually think, and especially if you're a Jesus follower, I think what you're asking is the greatest question, is how is
Thank you.
Yeah, it really is.
Such a
And you're
great
awesome
question.
too.
Pastor Tim, I love you more.
That's such a great
I
question.
love you more.
I know you
I
do.
think you're a great leader.
I thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll tell you more about that later.
Would you-
in your
okay,
office.
let's-
But those would be my two things.
I love what you
would
said
say.
about the power of words. And I think because that was one of the big questions that came out of this whole thing was I remember watching the media, and again, the media is there's no unbiased to how the media approaches anything. But the primary message coming out of it was Donald Trump incites the riots with what he said. And so I had to kind of go back and actually listen to what were the words that he said. Did he, you know what I mean? And that's all, and that's the big question I think right now. That's over impeachment, over can he face criminal charges? When he's out of office, can he face criminal charges for the things that he said? I don't know if it's just on that day at his own rally or even going further back.
So we've talked about if you're a conservative or Republican, but you're a Christ follower first, and you want to process this in a way that resembles, the heart of somebody who follows Jesus. What about if you're a Democrat? What if, because let me just throw out some things that I've heard and some things that I hear on the news. I told you this would happen. None of us should be surprised that this happened. Shame on anybody who took place in electing this man. Those are some of the more extreme things people have said. So, how do you, as a Democrat, you're a Christ follower, how do you, process this in a healthy way?
I think a few things.
How do you respond?
I think number one, you should never take pleasure in anyone's downfall. You should always hope for people to succeed. And if you're a Christ follower, I think I told you the other day, I felt convicted that I've not prayed for my president more. Like right now, President Trump is my president. And as a follower of Jesus, I'm called to pray for him. I can civically disagree with actions and respectfully communicate those, whether I am a Republican or a Democrat, whoever's in office.
Or libertarian.
I mean, I thought you were going to tell them what I am.
I'm just throwing it out there. Tea Party, whatever.
Yeah, I'm a Tea Party libertarian socialist. That is a joke for anyone listening.
Wow.
But I
am not those things. I just will
you're
say
just
that.
a socialist. But no, I think number one is if there's any part in you that relishes, there's any part in me that relishes a downfall of a leader, that's a heart check moment. Because you should not want any human being to fail.
I want President Biden to succeed.
Yeah, and for any leader to fail means Americans fail. So not only because they're a human being, but for the sake of our country, you shouldn't want them to fail. I think number two, in every moment when anyone fails, you got to remember, one of my favorite verses is mercy triumphs over judgment, and God will show mercy to those who are merciful. So when anyone fails, whether it's in a political arena or a spiritual arena, I always think, what kind of grace would I want shown to me? And I'm not trying to whitewash.
Sure.
I'm not trying at all to whitewash big mistakes of whatever you're grieved on both sides. But I do think in every arena in life and in every filtering in life, humility is a great salt for every meal that helps you process in a healthy way. I think the third thing you should remember is I was talking to somebody the other day that leans more liberal, and what was interesting was his great concern and fear from this was actually the rupturing and the downfall of the Republican Party. And it was a really interesting perspective. He said, my fear is, he said, even as someone who would associate and acknowledge myself as more liberal, he said, any honest person knows that a liberal party needs a viable opposition. And they need a viable Republican Party. I mean, I think all of us would probably argue that a third party would also be awesome.
Yeah.
But no matter what side you're on, you should hope for the iron sharpens iron's sake for nothing else, or for checks and balances. We need both of them to be viable parties.
Yeah.
We need that. So those are two or three immediate thoughts.
About you?
Well, you said a lot there that I think is I would agree with. I think if I'm a Democrat and I'm looking at this situation, I think one of the things that's just missing from both parties, so I'll just say this, is a lack of empathy for a different political view and a different side and the person on the other side. And that's kind of what I feel like that's what gets lost a little bit. So if you're a Christ follower and you would say you're lean more left or you're a Democrat and that's how you vote, and you could vote that way because there are certain issues that you feel like that are more important that picks up than the right or the conservative does. I feel like that one of the things that would be important if you're a Christ follower is to say, I see the person more than I see the political side, or I see, that. And so that would lead me to what you just kind of said, you know what I mean, to the same kind of conclusion, which is I need to care about that person, and I need to care about, I would, hopefully you would care about the whole state of our country. One of the things to me that would be the most heartbreaking thing from it is to look at it and go, I just one of the things I just felt like was our country is disseminating further and further away from each other and into a world of division, and we're getting further away, not closer to each other. And so,
Are you worried about the future of Christianity?
No. But I do think that these kind of moments are actually they actually work. And what I hope that is happening is that it's separating. If anything, I would hope there becomes more of a separation of Christianity and politics.
So you're saying that you don't think that the installation of Joe Biden as president is going to ruin the Christian faith, our freedom to express worship in this country?
I don't think it will. I mean, I can
there's
be
a lot of
I can be
people
wrong.
like that.
I know, but a lot of people. I don't think that it's going to.
And even if it did, that wouldn't hurt Christianity.
It's not going to hurt Christianity. That's what I said. Look at China. Look at where for years underground church has just grown and multiplied faster than any other movement of Christianity around the world. And so to me, when you say Christianity, no, I'm not. Okay, now if I were to put on the hat as a pastor who's trying to manage a church, who's trying to do this, yeah, there's crazy implications with, what could happen in there. But that's why I just have to keep going back to reminding myself that my hope and my trust is not in the government. It's not in this. It's in Jesus and the fact that he said in Matthew 16, I'll build my church and nothing's going to really stop this. And it's been 2,000 years and we've gone through every imagined and around the globe of insurrection and political unrest and pandemics and whatever, and the church is still here and it's not going anywhere. So when you say, or I say at least Christianity, no, but what I hope is happening through this political mess that's going on is I hope there becomes more of a separation. Now I understand that many conservatives, Christians, you vote in representatives that you hope represent the values that you carry. That's the same thing with the liberals and the left side or Democrats, right? That's what you do in a republic that we have. So I understand that. What I don't like, and maybe this is kind of where you're going, is I don't like the attachment to candidates and political parties that they are our savior or that somehow that this is the. Because I do feel like one of the challenges has been is that people on political sides with values, moral values, that I wonder if people feel like they can justify the violence of January 6th and the mob because they say, well, I'm standing up for moral things in this country and we're losing our moral ground. So if we don't fight and break the law, then we're going to lose. Yeah, and participate. Then we're going to lose our moral standing. It's like, okay, wait a minute.
Since when did morality come through legislature?
Yeah.
Since when did revival come through legislature? Legislature matters. Having laws matter. Absolutely. But I think what you're saying
in the Old Testament it did, but we won't go there.
Well, no. Standards always matter. So, well,
I just meant morality come through legislation. That happened in the Old Testament with the Ten Commandments.
But with the desire to always write it on their hearts.
Yes. No, I'm
right.
just making a joke. That was a biblical joke.
But I agree with you because I think it would be dishonest to say, I wouldn't care if our religious freedoms, our livelihood, our careers, what we enjoy in our religious
freedom
freedoms.
of worship.
You don't want to take that for granted.
No.
However, I think it's so important that we don't mix up I think sometimes what we call our life convictions are really just life conveniences. And when you look at the New Testament, it actually wasn't until persecution came that the gospel exploded.
Yeah.
Right. And the gospel is not chained to whether or not someone in Washington puts a law there.
Right.
Yeah. Laws matter. The godly law should be in place. I don't want murder to be illegal. But and I think, and this hopefully is a place to grow.
You don't want murder to be legal. You said you don't want murder to be legal.
Is that a Freudian slip?
And you said illegal instead of illegal.
So, illegal. It's illegal.
No, it's illegal.
But let's clarify. You don't want murder to be legal.
You don't
to be legal. Yes.
You don't want chaos to abound.
Right. I don't want chaos.
Reason why God
Laws
created.
matter. But
there's a higher principle to it. Like when God gave a single rule in the garden.
Yeah, but yes.
You know what I mean?
Okay, when Peter and John were arrested, what they didn't do was go try to find a lawyer and say, this is so unfair. You know that new Roman emperor, Caligula? who's very immoral. We need to try to come together and find a way so that we can bring a lawsuit. And I know times are changing. I know it's the beauty of living in this country, and I'm not minimizing any of that. But they knew what Paul said is that a true spiritual fight is not a fight of flesh and blood.
Right.
It's a spiritual fight.
Yeah.
So I believe.
You know what they actually said when they were beaten in Acts chapter 4?
Well, they went to a prayer meeting.
Well, but they were beaten, and then they were released. And they said, you can look this up in Acts 4, they said they could, it was almost in a grateful way. They thought, I can't believe that we were considered worthy of the suffering.
Right.
In Jesus' name.
Right.
Like it's total opposite. It was
Yes.
it was that they were like they celebrated the fact that they were considered worthy to suffer the way
They
Jesus
didn't see
suffered
themselves
about.
as victims of a government. They saw themselves as victors because of who they were in their faith. And I just think it's important to put an exclamation point on that. This is not, I think all of us have a place to thrive and flourish with God's individual, unique callings and giftings. There's a place for doing that in politics. Thank God for those that have integrity and courage and that want to do that in the field of politics or in the field of law enforcement, or the field in teaching. Every field needs people in their own right. But I think we're, and I guess this is part of empathy, but also challenge. Part of, I think, the deep fear and like despair that comes in is if I make the mistake of attaching my faith to a political party.
Right.
Yeah.
When the faith has never depended on a government that imposes and puts a seal of approval on me. It spreads not through legislation but through the Spirit of God and the power of the gospel. And ironically, I'm not saying I want this, but ironically, historically, the gospel is spread furthest in the place with the deepest persecution.
Yeah.
Because there comes a complacency and this weird, what in my mind is an unhealthy, quasi-religious political marriage subculture
Yes.
that actually becomes more toxic than anything that opposes it.
Yes.
Agree.
Well, I mean, I think I agree with so much of what you guys are saying. And I have nothing to add.
Sorry, what do you think?
You guys no, I would say, yeah, totally on board with everything you guys are saying. I think that as a Christian, there should be some things that you are aware of, that people are saying, that people would say, a Christian can only believe this. Or a vote for somebody else is a vote to kill babies. Or if
I've heard this one.
If
If you voted for how can you say you're a Christian and vote Democrat?
Right.
I've heard that from
I've
somebody.
heard it from many people.
I've heard it.
It actually is something that's just thrown out, and it's just kind of people just whip it out.
Yeah.
You just people will just whip out. Oh yeah, Obama was the Antichrist.
Yeah.
That's a casual phrase, and whatever you. I would say you need to develop a list of things that you hear as a Christian between your time with you and the Spirit of God to go, God, when I hear something, what is it that I need to be aware of?
Yeah.
I think there's a pastor, Beth Moore, who not related.
She's not a pastor.
To,
She's a Bible teacher.
Bible teacher. Sorry,
That's
Not
supposed to mean?
related to me,
not related
but
to
related
the other
to
Moores
Russ.
at the table. But this was on December 13th.
Why
This
didn't we
tweet-
call this podcast something in like Illich and Moore? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
This tweet, this tweet made it around the our sphere right away.
Yeah.
It's very bold for her to say this in her context. But she tweeted on December 13th, 2020. She said, "I do not believe that these are the days for mincing words. I'm 63 and a half years old, and I've never seen anything in these United States of America I found more astonishingly seductive and dangerous to the saints of God than Trumpism. This Christian nationalism is not of God. Move back from it." She goes on to say, "Fellow leaders, we will be held responsible for remaining passive in this day of seduction to save our own skin, while the saints have been entrusted to serve are being seduced, manipulated, used, all caps, and stirred up into a lather of zeal devoid of the Holy Spirit for political gain." She goes on to say, "And God help us, we don't turn from Trumpism to Bidenism, and we do not worship flesh and blood. We do not place our faith in mortals. We are the church of the living God. We can't sanctify idolatry by labeling a leader our Cyrus. We need no Cyrus. We have a king. His name's Jesus. And I don't know that any of us could have imagined that was the first thing I thought of when I saw that banner you described, Jesus 2020, in a billboard size on the front of the Capitol. I think that if you're a Christian, you really have to be aware of the people who tell you how a Christian should think. If you're not first considering your own personal relationship with God, asking Him for wisdom, asking Him for clarity.
Do you think she's telling Christians how they should think?
I think it is a firm warning that I think Christians should consider. Personally,
Yeah.
If you're a Christian, I think you should consider.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think there's I actually did a message kind of like just as the whole political thing kind of was going on, and I even came out and said this is not a political message. This is about our response as a Christ follower to this moment in our country. And one of the things that you can find 2,000 years ago was a level of mixing religion with nationalism. And Paul spoke about that, and I think it's dangerous. I think anytime we mix our religion, our faith, with a sense of nationalism, and I understand it because I think in this country, of all places, the thing I had always heard growing up was this is a Christian nation. I would say it's not, at least today. I don't think it's going to classify as that. And not because I don't want it to be. I'm just saying, it's hard for me to look at our country and go, "This is a Christian nation." Okay, I just don't feel like that's represented necessarily. That was founded on Christian principles. Well, it was, which really what they were trying to say is that our forefathers, through what they believed as were Christian people, men who wrote our Constitution and other things, so that they're kind of founded on it. I mean, obviously, there's elements of belief in God written within our documents.
Right. The Christians who say that are the people in the name of Christianity are posing an insurrection to supersede what that Constitution says.
Right.
What those guys who
and
inserted Christian morals into.
It just and it seems
in the name
like
of Christianity. That's the hypocrisy. I don't know that I think you need to have your eyes open to.
Yeah.
You
can't say that you're for insurrection because it's the only way to uphold your values when it is breaking the very law that you claim to be upholding.
I would say, and I'm with you. That was one of the very first tweets I thought of when I saw what happened at the Capitol. And I would be so bold to say, if you have sunk into or are sinking into a unhealthy form, I don't know if there's a healthy form, of Christian nationalism. Doesn't mean you can't be. There's a difference between patriotism and nationalism, to where you're mixing the two and justifying anything that happened in the Capitol. You've gotten so busy building a kingdom on earth in the name of God that you're no longer building the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my biggest concern in all this, I have a lot of concerns when it comes to our political, the way we're talking to each other, the political conversation. I have a lot of concerns. And I'm history buff, man. I'm you should see. I'm off social media, but I'm watching all these YouTube videos of all these old interviews, 60 Minutes and Meet the Press. I'm talking back to 2000 when we're going through the vote count of Florida and all that. So many things that I'm trying to. How did this happen? Is the question I'm asking myself. How did we get here? Because surely that there's not one man that could have led an entire nation to this point of division. That this has been years and years and years of unhealthy, unproductive political discourse. Years, decades even. And my biggest concern through it all as someone who follows Jesus is I don't even know if I want to say it, but I'm going to, just Christians that are so concerned about the future of Christianity in the hands of another party that they would rather choose to worship a man. That they would choose to worship and deify everything that Donald Trump does. And I think that I'm really concerned about that. I'm concerned about that in the church, in the Christian faith.
Yeah. There's a cult of personality surrounding him that, depending on how you view him, is unprecedented. He made the statement one time that he could kill someone on Manhattan and there would be leaders that would still support him.
Mm-hmm. Fifth Avenue, but
You're right. Yeah. And say what?
Fifth Avenue.
Fifth Avenue.
Fifth Avenue. And he's right.
I think one of the interesting things.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead. Or no, I didn't know you're done. I think one of the big concepts that's kind of spun out of this for me, as I've watched over the last week, everybody really bringing up these, should he be liable for his words? I listened to his specific words that he said at his speech when he was like, we should march down to Capitol Hill. We need to show strength, that we're kind of, some people would say, hey, those were his words, or those were the things that incited people to go. That means that we got to go break in and we got to stop this, because what's happening right now is the election has been stolen. Again, this I don't think this was just a one thing at this rally. I think this was months of kind of like what he has said, and has incited people to this kind of response at the end of the day. The real question that I began to process and think is, where does this fall in somebody or anybody being responsible for their words? Because I found that's an interesting question, even legally as well as morally. And I think those are two separate things, legally and morally. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the days and weeks to come, as some are sitting there going, we want to bring criminal. I mean, I saw that the day of people and lawyers, federal lawyers going, we want to bring criminal charges against him for things that he said. But they're not his physical actions, but things he said. I will say that my great disappointment as it went on by 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon was like, you were just at a rally, you're like, come out and condemn people breaking in to a federal building during something that's going on. Come out. And he never really did. Then he released a video, and this is where it's, I think, caused the dissension amongst even his own staff. I mean, there's been several of his staff that went ahead and resigned. There's been, I think, 3 cabinet members at this point that have resigned. Or, I mean, many of them were going to be out anyways, but they're resigning because they're like, I do not want to be identified with this. And I appreciated that Vice President Pence came out very strong. And I appreciated what Joe Biden said on his speech. I thought it was a great, and that. And then it just kind of like, it just kind of brought into focus that what I do not appreciate about what President Trump has done, even when he released that video where it was, again, we're all the victims. It was stolen from us, but hey, go home. And it wasn't real strong. But then
we love you and your special people.
Yeah, and what keeps coming out is that I keep wondering, is like, how much do our words, how much weight do they carry? How much should we be responsible for?
And I think that's more even what I was referencing when I'm looking back at all these interviews and all these things is when I watch, I'm one of those people that'll flip through the different news channels, on a night like last Wednesday. I'm watching NBC, CNN, Fox News, all these things. I'm watching everything. I'm just on a carousel. Once one goes to commercial break, I'm on to the next one. And can't help but to agree with every word you're saying is that I looked at those events this past Wednesday going, wow, we all in this country have to take more responsibility for how we talk to one another, to how we disagree, to how we're teaching our children to engage in this kind of dialogue, because this is what it leads to. This is what it makes possible, is this kind of dissension, this kind of violence, this kind of, lives lost. Just horrendous. And so I just totally agree about I think you should feel a personal responsibility to talk to each other better. Whether you're a Democrat, whether you're Republican, whether you don't associate with either one, if you are especially a Christ follower, then you have to go, wow, has my tongue been divisive? Have I contributed to tearing people apart? Have I contributed to name-calling? Have I contributed to tearing people down? Have I contributed to anything like that, the destruction? Have I contributed to hypocrisy? Have I spoke too soon? Have I spoke too quick? I think you should consider all those things because we all bear some responsibility.
Absolutely. Well, I think about, when you say those, I think about the words of Jesus, right? If you're gonna put Jesus' name at this rally where this is going on, right? Well, let's talk about what Jesus said. Jesus said, out of the mouth flows what's in the heart. And so at some point, I think we have to look at our leaders, other people, and ourselves in the mirror and say, if, like you said, if I'm out there and I am tearing down people because they would vote differently or they think differently, if I'm like, what I tell you, what has been a blessing at being, like we've said earlier, being on a social media fast, is just knowing how divisive, how angry, how ugly social media has become. And I think there needs to be all of us, okay? How do me, just a lowly, pastor who lives in Columbus, Ohio, process
Just a
this?
humble pastor.
Well, it's like, how do,
lowly worm.
Just
I'm
a
just a
lowly
lowly
pastor.
worm. How
Just
do I process
just a
this
lowly
for me
motorcycle
personally?
enthusiast.
I'm not a motorcycle enthusiast. Okay.
Just
How
a
do I process
lowly Harley
this
lover.
as an individual that really has no bearing on what happens in Washington, D.C., other than I can cast a vote? You know what I mean? For different things. And that's it.
But you do because you contribute
Yeah.
to the conversation.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. But I'm just saying, for me
Not just
personally, as
you.
I look in the mirror, what I'm saying is, how do I address this thing and bring to myself and look at it? And I have to kind of say, if I want to be a part of bringing peace, blessed are the peacemakers,
Right.
if I want to be someone of that, then I have got to, like you said, you got to check what's in your heart by what's coming out of your mouth. That is your gut check. Is really your mouth check. It's what comes out, and it's what posted on social
Yes.
media. And it's like I think I've kind of come to a point, and you can call me old, I've come to a point where I just do not think that the benefits of social media outweigh the negatives.
Well, I just,
I know
even-
you'll disagree because you're
I don't.
younger, but
I
I
don't.
have come
I
to the
don't
point
disagree.
over the last year, 2 years to go, I don't think they actually do. I think they cause more damage. And yet, at the same time, I understand people will go, well, I can't trust the media, so now where am I supposed to get my source? Irregardless, and that is a word, by the way, in the dictionary now. Irregardless of that, what I would say is that to get on people's Facebook posts who express opinions one way or the other, I don't care if it is disparaging. I don't care if it is against your political candidate or your side. To get on there and to spew hate and to like, I just don't feel like it aligns with Jesus. And yet that's what we've seen represented by Christians a lot over this year. And it bothers the heck out of me.
I saw a tweet that I thought, wow, this is the problem with social media. And it was the pastor who ran and won his Senate seat in Georgia, Raphael Warnock, and he put a tweet out there. I think I sent it around to our pastor text. He said, "I'm a pro-choice pastor," and that was his tweet.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
It's like, what do you?
as a Christian, okay, we don't have the option to oversimplify our words into 140 characters or whatever it is. I just don't think that we understand the power that's in them and how we cheapen the message of Jesus through all of that.
Yeah.
It's like you can't, as a Christian, you can't care more about sound bites than you do the souls of the people around you and the souls of your community.
Yep.
And I would say this too. I think a lot of people really have embraced hating those who made the decision to go and do what they did at the Capitol, and have really said, I can't believe they would do that. I hate anybody that would do that. And I would caution anybody you can be completely discouraged and totally upset and think that they should receive the full extent of the law, but I would warn people not, check your soul, and I'd say make sure you totally believe and understand that you don't think anybody's outside of the love of Christ. That Jesus can't go and still touch people who are caught up in a mindset or an ideology.
If you're worried about the future of Christianity, I think a couple things. What's happening now really matters. This conversation is so important. How we process this is vital. But keep in mind, Jesus said, I'll build my church, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it, and that Jesus is going to build his church. And what's happening politically in 2021 in America is not going to prevent, if you believe what Scripture teaches and you're a follower of Jesus, our faith has got to rest at a higher source, and our trust has got to be in a higher rock than what's happening in Washington. It matters, but let's compare it to eternity against that backdrop. And then second off, if you're deep concern, because I think we got a heart check, is not man, is the country and the world I know changing from what I feel? Because that's a real concern.
Yeah.
We don't ever want to minimize that. But let's just be honest with ourselves about what our real concern is. Because if your real concern is, man, I'm worried about the gospel, good news. Jesus said, this is how the world will know you belong to me. Not the way you vote, not the way you stand on. Yep. He said, this is how you'll know. The way you love one another.
Yep.
So if your biggest concern is, man, I just feel like with everything the way it's going, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, good news. The number one thing that matters right now is not what political party you are attaching yourself to, but how you're loving people. And I think just to kind of bring it home is like maybe a self-challenge for us. Jesus said this. He said, he talked about the way you love and treat the least of these, you do it unto me. And I heard a pastor kind of extrapolate from this verse one time. A lot of times when we hear that verse, what you do the least of these, we interpret that as the really poor, the impoverished, the outcast. But if you look at the actual context of that verse, the translation means what you do to people that you tend to overlook and not see as human.
Yes.
So for me, the least of these may not be the poor person on the side of the road. It may be that celebrity that I make fun of and I dehumanize and I use them as a punching bag to make jokes about.
Yeah.
And I come to wait, hold on a second. For some people, it may be Kim Kardashian. I make some people, they may make jokes, or that's their punching bag to. But wait, she's a human being.
Right.
There's something that happens in my soul the moment I remember, oh wait, she's got Imago Dei, the image of God stamped on her. God made her. God died for her. And so for some of us, it may be, what does it look like to see the opposing political party that you tend to just pour all your venom on? What if you looked at President Trump or Nancy Pelosi with the understanding they're a human being made in the image of God, and maybe I need to soften my own heart. Maybe I just need to take a month to take the political leader that I have the most frustration towards and pray for them and their families every day.
That's a challenge. That's good.
That's
I
good.
like that.
What do you think that? I'm curious. Do you think that anything will come of people trying to attach a legal accusation against President Trump for things that he has said that may have led to the events?
Oh, how am I supposed to know that? And I think that I don't. I think that's one thing that we all have to admit is that we don't know as much as we think we know.
Yeah.
So there's a whole, FBI investigation, Department of Justice thing that, the rumors are that it's worse than anybody could have ever imagined. And that if
Not
the
just
public,
with him though, but we were talking about with other
the organization,
it's things.
but obviously it's connected to him.
Yes, obviously.
Because
but
he hasn't denounced it.
I don't know that they've got the connection yet.
But
in
my point
evidence,
is that we don't know, and that's my as a person living in the country, as an American, I'd say that's my biggest concern. Is like, wow, this is just seems damning, in every sense of the way. And we've seen so many things over the past year that you never thought you'd ever see.
Yeah.
That the thought of having a president, convicted of anything or it doesn't seem far-fetched.
Well,
what seems far-fetched anymore?
The one thing that's being said is that, well, he'll just pardon himself. I don't think that's going to hold up in a court of law, because I don't think anybody's above the law.
I think, but
to have all that
I would
power.
also say that it's hard to say that you are the most patriotic American and despise the constitutional process that's about to go down with all this. Because here we are about to test the strength and merit of that document, and of the separation of powers, which is why that's so important.
It is.
That somebody who would say, well, Trump's the biggest narcissist ever. Well, if that's the case, then our Constitution was, in a way, built to protect against that kingdoms. And so if you are somebody who you're just like, I'm so patriotic and I just love America, that's why I'm concerned. Well, if you love America, then here we go, because this is why we have the Constitution, and let's see it work. And so, I don't know. I think this conversation was fruitful, and I appreciate your guys' perspective a lot. And I really personally appreciate having the freedom to dialogue with you guys off this microphone.
Yeah.
And I hope people understand that we do a lot of talking before we even get here, because we want to make sure that we just I think out of love for one another want to make sure that we're not saying anything that would alienate anybody, because we know that these are hard times. These are really difficult times as a Christian, as an American, to really process. So find those people that you can have real dialogue with, you know, within the church, within your church community, within your context, that you can go, hey, you can have a real honest conversation.
And I think one of the things we wanted to create with that was, even just regardless of where you fall politically, was, and I think that's mostly where we wanted to come from, is that it's not a political referendum on what was going on, but more that it is a moral, or from the perspective as a Christ follower, what's my take on all the events that are happening right now. And I you know, again, some people may not like what Beth Moore tweeted, but I actually appreciate it, because I want my allegiance to be to Jesus, not to any political party or side. Why? Because we've said this before, that if you think your political party is going to save you, just wait long enough, it'll change. You go back in history and you're going to find that things that you thought one was on one side, one's on the other side, they have swapped in the last 30 years. And we could list several of those things right now. And so I just think it's really important, and I think it's hard because you get into a year like we had 2020, and it just seemed like it brought everything to a boiling point when we got to the political, actual election, and it just kind of threw people into, or it exposed where people are when it comes to policies, political views, and where they are. And it's like, it's okay to have political views. We want to say that. We want to say, it's like, one thing we're not doing is we're not sitting here telling you what you should believe, what political party and who you should vote for. I don't care about that. What I care about more than anything, especially as a Christ follower who does sit in a position of influence. I'm not in a position like Donald Trump, but I sit. So I want to, one of the reasons why we have conversations, because I want to be careful that my tone and that the words that I use do not, I want to challenge at times, but I want to do it in love, and I want to do it in a way where it's like, if you would disagree with me or something I say, that's fine. I'm still going to love you, and you matter more than our disagreement. And so it's okay. And I just feel like that's why we need to have more conversations like this, is because we digress to this base level of humanity where we cannot even dialogue and we can't disagree anymore without hating people, without spewing hate and venom out of our mouths. And I don't know what will come of Donald Trump and him being responsible for words that he might have said. We're not talking about actions that they're investigating right now, but the words. And all I know is that words do matter. And I saw this list just because I was thinking about this, about words that matter. And I went through and I saw this list that just kind of grieved my heart. And it was a list of the names, and it wasn't all of them, but names of people for like the last 20 or 30 years of young people that committed suicide because of bullying. Words. Nobody physically did anything to them, but the power of the words. And we're talking about 9-year-olds. And these were names of people, kids, 9, 11, 12-year-olds, boys and girls, that just took their life because they could not, because of the power of words. What you said, the power of life and death is in the tongue. And I just think we then need to take ownership of our own words. Donald Trump will be responsible for his own words. Listen, possibly, legally, I don't know that there's legal precedence, but legally he could. But I know this: he'll be responsible for his words before his maker one day. And I will be responsible for my words before my maker one day. And I need to, that's where I want to resolve. I want to take ownership of what's in my heart. I want to take ownership for my words. I want to think before I tweet, before I post, before I do anything. I want to think, is this honoring? Is this loving? Is this building someone up, even if I disagree with them? And if it isn't, don't post it. Just why do we feel like we have to? I've got to get my say in. And it's okay to disagree and talk about policies and politics, but if you can't do it well, it's like the old adage: if you have nothing nice to say, then don't say anything at all. So.
Got in on that. So I love you guys. I appreciate you.
Yeah, this was a fun conversation.
And we're praying the best over our country for sure.
Absolutely.
Peace and for
hey, we'd love to.
come
I feel like,
together.
can I just say, we would love to know your reaction to our conversation. Good, bad. I don't like this. Whatever. And you can email us in a podcast@thex.church. And we're just trying to spur conversation and get you to think.
Yep.
Yep.
We just want you to think critically. Think, again, we're going to think through the lens of our faith, but I think we welcome that. Like we don't live in a bubble. We're okay with that. We're not trying to offend anybody, but we are trying to speak what we believe is important and is true. And if it does challenge you, great. Hopefully you begin to think, that's what we're doing. You guys challenge me every time we have conversations, and I love it. So, anyways, love you guys. It's been a great conversation. Enjoy it.
Like, subscribe, share. We'll see you next week.